Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Dr. CENGİZ, Professor Dr. CENGİZ TORAMAN,
yes, right,
for chairing the session.
Good pronunciation.
I know
yes,
everyone.
thank you.
I know everyone is tired. This is the last presentation. I will try my best to make it as simple as possible. It's already 11:30 p.m. in Malaysia. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of my dearest colleague and friend, Assistant Professor Dr. Sheila Ainun. The reason I'm here today is because of her invite. Thank you very much, Dr. Sheila, for your kind gesture to link me with ASSAM. And for today, I would also like to extend my deepest gratitude to the organizing committee of the conference for accepting my paper to be presented in this esteemed Congress. So without delaying, I would like to begin my presentation. And the title of my presentation tonight is, let me minimize this and hide the floating. Okay, the title is SULU Arbitration, Ridiculous Claims of a Long Lost Sovereign. We have been listening to presentation by the professor from Uzbekistan, and then from Pakistan/Morocco, and then just now we listened to an in-depth analysis by our professor from the United States on Kashmir. So now I would like to draw your attention to Southeast Asia, whereby before that, let me just introduce myself. I'm now teaching at the Faculty of Sharia and Law as an associate professor, University Science Islam Malaysia, and I'm also a research associate at the College of Asia and the Pacific, Australian National University. And this is where I work at the moment. This is the nearest university to the main airport of Kuala Lumpur. So if you happen to visit Malaysia, happen to transit via the Kuala Lumpur International Airport, KLIA, this is the university that is nearest, the nearest public university to the international airport. I might say that this is actually Malaysia's gateway university, as it is located very close to the international airport. As I mentioned earlier, we have been listening to a number of presentation focusing on Central Asia, focusing on South Asia, focusing on other parts of the world. Now I would like to draw your attention to Southeast Asia, particularly my country, Malaysia, which, let me just explain, divided into two parts, the Malay Peninsula on the west, and the Borneo states of Sabah and Sarawak in the east. And today I would like to focus on the state of Sabah, which is located here on the eastern part of Malaysia. Why is this state so important? Because at the moment, there is a long lost sultanate that was established in the 15th century, ruling some parts of the Sabah territory. And this sultanate was abolished in 1915. And until today, even though Sabah has become part of Malaysia, there has been ridiculous claims of compensation from the descendants of the Sultan of Sulu to claim money for what Malaysia owed to them, which in actual fact, we did not owe anything to them because the Sultanate is long gone. Let me give you a brief introduction to the history of this region. Sabah, the state of Sabah, is part of the Malay archipelago, which is all this area over here. We call this the Malay world, which was the cradle of civilization, where a number of pre-Islamic kingdoms have emerged before Islam came to this region in the 14th century, beginning with the Malay kingdom of Srivijaya, that ruled this area from 7th to the 13th century AD. This kingdom was so huge that Arab accounts state that the empire was so vast that the swiftest vessel would not have been able to travel around all of its island within 2 years. And after that came the Kingdom of Majapahit based on the island of Java over here that ruled much of the archipelago. And finally came the Sultanate of Brunei. Brunei, you know, the country that it still exists today as a sovereign state, used to rule much part of the Borneo island, to the extent that the word Borneo, the island of Borneo, is a corruption of the name Brunei. As you can see on this animation map over here, before the arrival of the British colonizers in the 19th century, Brunei used to be a formidable kingdom, ruled almost all parts of Borneo, including southern Philippines and the state of Sabah. But when the British arrived, the Sultanate, I mean, when the Western colonizers arrived, the power of this Malay Sultanate of Brunei diminished bit by bit. And this was the Sulu Sultanate at its height. It used to rule some part of Sabah, and now it is claiming compensation from Malaysia, stating that we are actually using resources that that actually belong to them, even though the Sultanate is no longer there. Okay, to give you a brief idea, Sabah as a state in Malaysia today used to be ruled by the Brunei Sultanate. You know, in my previous two slides, I had shown to you the vast empire of the Brunei Sultanate before it diminished bit by bit with the arrival of the British. And then in 1685, the territory of Sabah, especially the eastern part, was transferred to Sulu, the empire that I mentioned earlier on. And then in 1878, this territory was transferred to the North Borneo Chartered Company, owned by the British. And the Philippines, which a country that is located not too far from Sabah, was ruled by the Spanish beginning 1521, before the sovereignty over the Philippine Islands was transferred to the Americans in 1899. And then the Sulu Sultanate, which ruled this area over here, was annexed as part of the Philippines in 1915 and later 1917 through the Carpenter Accord. Okay, through the Carpenter Accord. There's an agreement in 1915 whereby the United States has abrogated the Sulu Sultanate, and it is no longer there. It is no longer there. So Sabah used to be part of the Sulu Sultanate, and in 1878, the sovereignty over Sabah was transferred to the British. Meanwhile, Sulu Sultanate remained as a sovereign until 1915. Apologize for the mistake on the slide, not 1917, on 1915. The Sultanate was abrogated and annexed as part of the Philippine archipelago, Philippine colony of the United States at that time. So according to the 1915 Carpenters Agreement, on March 22, 1915, the Sultan of Sulu relinquished his sovereignty over Sulu. The question is, if the sovereignty has been relinquished, how could Sulu Sultanate claim compensation from Malaysia? It doesn't make sense. And later on, this was the situation, the political situation in mid-20th century, where many Southeast Asian territories fell into colonization. And later on, Japanese, in World War II, the Japanese claimed much of Southeast Asia as part of its colony. And upon the defeat of the Japanese and the Germans in 1945, Southeast Asia, many countries in Southeast Asia gained independence through the international law concept of uti possidetis juris. Under this concept, uti possidetis juris means, I beg your pardon, it means that a newly independent nation must inherit the territory of its former colonial master. So Malaysia became Malaysia today because it used to be part of British Malaya and British Borneo. Indonesia became a country it is today because it was part of the Dutch East Indies. The same goes with the Philippines, East Timor, and other parts of Southeast Asia. And this created a number of weird boundaries. For example, this photo over here, the other side is Singapore, and on this side, just 12 kilometers away is Indonesia. So in the past, it used to be part of the same territory, the same kingdom that the old kingdom, the ancient kingdoms that I did mention earlier in my presentation. So now they become separate into two different countries because Singapore was colonized by the British, Indonesia was colonized by the Dutch, and when they gained independence, they became two separate nations. Together with this, the other side belongs to Malaysia. On this side, the island belongs to Indonesia. And also this, on that side is Thailand, this side is Malaysia. And for Sabah, as it used to be part of the British colony, when it gained independence within Malaysia in 1963, this was the boundary lines that separated Sabah and the Philippines later on, when Philippines were liberated from the American rule. So this area that used to be part, if you look at this map over here, if you look at this map that I prepared earlier on, Sabah used to be part of the Sulu Sultanate in the past, but because of the changing of power, changing of the ruling power, and later on through the concept of uti possidetis juris, Sabah now became part of Malaysia because Malaysia succeeded it from United Kingdom, whilst Philippines became another country as Philippines inherited it from the Spanish or the American rule. So Sabah right now no longer belong to Sulu. That's the most important thing that I would like to explain to everyone. Sabah no longer belongs to Sulu, and Sulu is no longer there. It was abrogated in 1915. And Federation of Malaya gained independence in 1957. And according to a report, upon independence of Sabah and Sarawak, upon Sabah and Sarawak being federated into Malaysia, the findings of the Cobalt Commission says that 2/3 of Sabahans, people of Sabah, support the formation of Malaysia. And that's why the Malaysia today is formed by two parts, the peninsula, which gained independence in 1957, and then it was later federated with Sarawak and Sabah in 1963. Sulu was no longer in the picture. Okay, so if you look at international law, under the Montevideo Convention 1934, in order for the political entity to be recognized as a sovereign state, it must possess a territory, number one. Number two, having a population. Number three, organized government. And number four, capacity to make agreements with other states. Based on this requirement under the Montevideo Convention 1934, Malaysia is a sovereign state. Sulu is not a sovereign state because it is no longer there. It is no longer there. It has been abrogated by the American rulers in 1915. And what about territorial acquisition under international law? A state can acquire territory through a number of ways under international law. Number one is cession. A territory could be ceded by one country to the other. The second one is colonization, territorial acquisition through military conquest. It has been this method has been highly declared as illegal today, even though some parts of the world are still being colonized by other countries through military conquest. However, United Nations Charter has clearly said that this method is no longer legal. And the third one is prescription, the continuous exercise of sovereignty over certain territories by a state without being persistently objected by other countries. So if you look at Sabah, Malaysia has administered Sabah since 1963, even though Philippines have claimed Sabah from Malaysia a number of times, but face it, Sabahans hold Malaysian passport, Malaysian identification card, and it is the Malaysian government who established a working government in Sabah. So how this, in a way, shows to the world that Malaysia has continuously exercised sovereignty over Sabah without being persistently objected by other countries. we have never gone to war with regards to Sabah with the Philippines. There's never been a war like what happened in Kashmir with regards to Sabah. So this is an indication that the whole world acknowledges Sabah as part of Malaysia. And I have come to my conclusion, can the SULU, the long gone, the foregone SULU Sultanate claim compensation from Malaysia for Sabah? Okay, these are my answers here. Sabah originally was ruled by Brunei before it was placed under the influence of the SULU Sultanate. And then the sovereignty over Sabah was transferred to the British with payment of cession money. Okay, with payment of cession money. But we have to remember that the payment was made in the past, but the Sulu Sultanate lost its sovereignty through the Carpenter Agreement in 1915. So there is no need to, we do not owe them anything for that matter. And Sabah was federated into Malaysia in 1963. And like what I've mentioned earlier on, since 1963, Sabah was continuously administered by Malaysia, and it was the Malaysian government that established a working government and invested in infrastructural as well as human development projects in that state of Sabah. Sulu is a long-lost sovereign that has no rights over Sabah, what more claiming compensation over it. So with that, I would like to end my presentation, and I would like to invite you, if you wish to read more about what I have written on this matter, please visit my website where I have compiled all my articles, my short articles, and also my journal articles that I've written. The links are all here, and I would like to invite everyone from Turkey and also other parts of the world to visit Malaysia. But I totally agree with one of the speakers just now. The relationship not only with Pakistan and Turkey, but with Malaysia. Turkey is one of the most important strategic partners of Malaysia, and we have enjoyed so many benefits from having good relationship between the two nations. Okay, so hopefully Malaysia and Turkey will work together and become a strong country to bring forward Muslims' voice in the world arena. So with this, I would like to end my presentation, and I'm passing back the floor to the Professor Chairperson. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Inshallah. Thank you very much. It was a very useful and interesting presentation. We finished our season. Any comments?